Joining me now is Dr. Kimberly Marten, a political science professor at Barnard College, Columbia University. Dr. Marten, the world was really shocked over the weekend after Wagner mercenary group briefly rebelled against Russian President Vladimir Putin. And you actually testified before Congress on the Wagner group twice. So can you explain to us what this group exactly is and how Russia got to this point?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me here. So a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, it's not really a private military company. It is a contracting mechanism for the Russian Defense Intelligence Agency. Prigozhin himself has no combat experience. He is not the commander of the group. He has been the middleman, the contractor. It's also not really a mercenary group because everybody who has signed on to it understands that they are working for the Russian state. They're working on behalf of what the Russian defense enterprises want them to do. It got its start in eastern Ukraine in 2014. Then it was sent to Syria, where it acted essentially as infantry forces to support the Russian support of the Syrian government. Starting in about 2017, 2018, it went into Africa in various places. It is currently on the ground in the Central African Republic and in Mali. There is a small presence, mostly as guard forces of gold mines in Sudan. There is also a force that's supporting a warlord named Khalifa Haftar in eastern Libya. And then it has been playing a big role for the Russian military in Ukraine, especially most recently in the Battle of Bakhmut, where Prigozhin was able to enlist prisoners and give them a release of their sentence and a pardon in return for fighting on behalf of Russia in Bakhmut. The other thing to keep in mind is that there's no evidence that this was actually a coup attempt against Russia. It was a very misguided attempt by Yevgeny Prigozhin to bring attention to his grievances that seems to have failed.
You said it's a misguided attempt. Can you explain? Maybe let's take a step back here. And can you explain his relationship with Vladimir Putin? You called him a middleman. It seemed like from reports that they were on the same side. Obviously, that quickly shifted over the weekend. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So Yevgeny Prigozhin began his life as a convict in a Soviet prison. He was an ordinary street criminal who had committed robberies and burglaries. He got out 2 years early, and we know that that probably means that there was some sort of a deal made with what was then the KGB, what is now the Russian FSB. At the time he got out, Putin was the deputy mayor of St. Petersburg, and Putin had responsibility for signing off on all the contracts for businesses. And that's how they first became acquainted. And so Putin would have approved Prigozhin's hot dog stand and then his grocery store and then his restaurants in St. Petersburg. And they also had an association with the same organized criminal group in St. Petersburg. Putin began patronizing his restaurants. And then when Putin went to Moscow and joined the Kremlin, he brought Prigozhin with him. Prigozhin became the caterer for the Kremlin. He also got the contract for providing food to the Moscow public school system. And then he became a cleaning contractor for the military. And then in about 2015 or 2016, he took over the Wagner group in what may have been a violent confrontation. So that's what we know about Prigozhin's history. And he has been fighting with the Russian Defense Ministry for a very long time. Back at the time that he was a cleaning contractor, they took each other to court for various things. So this isn't new that this conflict would be going on. In the past several months, it's changed scope because Prigozhin has been making a lot of very public media statements that are very nasty about the Russian Defense Ministry. And it has just progressively gotten out of hand. And the way things work in Russia is that you have protection, and the phrasing that's used to describe people who are under the protection of the state or under the protection of the authorities is that they have a roof. And so Prigozhin has been under Putin's roof, and Prigozhin has done a lot of service activities on behalf of Putin. And what has seemed to be happening over the last few months is that Prigozhin's head got too big for his roof. So he has never been all that important as an individual player, but he seemed to inflate his own sense of importance and seemed to believe that by theatrically marching on the Russian city and then marching towards Moscow, that he could get the ear of the leadership for the complaints that he'd been making that he did not feel had been getting an adequate response.
Is there any indication that Prigozhin is still under this roof, or is he gone? Because as we know, Putin notoriously cracks down on his adversaries, and as of right now, it doesn't look like Prigozhin has been punished.
As of yet, he is not, but again, it's a very fluid situation. So here's what we do know. We do know that Russian state media reported this morning that the investigations of Prigozhin have not been ended. So that implies that it has not been resolved. Prigozhin has not been seen publicly. He did release a video, an audio recording on his Telegram channel, his social media channel, about an hour ago, where he talked about that this wasn't against Putin, that this was just against the defense ministry, and that he intended to take a group of Wagner fighters to Belarus with him to continue to serve Putin in Belarus. And so I think it's still very fluid. We're just collecting information as time goes by, but we will probably not know the final disposition of this for many days and maybe many weeks. Putin has punished previous people even when they have been quote unquote forgiven. And so the best example that we have of that is that back when Dmitry Medvedev was supposedly the president, but we know Putin was still in control in 2010, a former intelligence operative named Sergei Skripal was officially pardoned, and then he was exchanged with the West in a spy exchange. And of course, Skripal was one of the victims of the Novichok poisoning in the United Kingdom in 2018, which is an indication that being pardoned by the Russian state does not actually stop you from being considered a traitor who is perhaps at some future point going to be taken down.